The ball rolled past the swing set and into sunlight. Ethan chased it, shoes slapping the concrete like drums, laughter bouncing behind him like a kite tail. 10 years old. A black boy with curly hair, untamed energy, and a Superman t-shirt one size too big. His father had folded it twice that morning, military style, but by now it hung loose, fluttering as he ran. The park was a painting. Late afternoon light spilling through oak branches, mothers leaning over strollers, retirees walking dogs they spoke to like children, the kind of quiet America people brag about when no one is watching closely. James Miller watched closely. He always did. From the bench near the basketball court, he sat in silence, arms folded, eyes behind sunglasses. Calm posture, quiet breath, but not relaxed. Never relaxed. The sun painted gold on his forearms. A slight breeze rustled the sleeves of his button-down. But none of that reached him, because James had seen too much. He'd carried secrets that never made the papers. He knew exactly what could happen when someone thought a black child didn't belong. He saw it before it happened. It started with a shadow. A uniformed figure stepped into frame. Mid-40s, stocky, white, the kind of face that wore arrogance like a badge. Sergeant Travis Matthews. He scanned the park like he owned it. Not looking for danger, looking for disruption. His eyes landed on Ethan. James sat up straighter but didn't move. Not yet. Matthews stalked towards the boy. One hand already hovering near his belt, the other casually swinging a baton against his thigh like a drummer before a show. Ethan saw him too late. "Hey!" the officer barked. The laughter died instantly. Children went still. The sound of the ball tapping curbside echoed like a dropped gavel. James was already on his feet, walking, not running across the grass. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked, calm as steel cooling in air. Matthews didn't look at him, didn't blink. His eyes stayed locked on the child. "This your kid?" Matthews grunted, voice flat. James nodded once. "Yes, he's playing, that's all." "He's been running around suspiciously," the officer said, stepping closer. "Jumping over benches, darting behind trees. Looks like casing behavior." James almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he stepped between the cop and the boy. Slowly, deliberately. "He's playing hide-and-seek," he said, "like every other 10-year-old on that field." Matthews narrowed his eyes. "I don't know you. You new to the neighborhood?" James didn't answer. Because something shifted. Matthews reached out and grabbed Ethan's arm. Hard. The boy gasped. A short, sharp sound. One that shouldn't exist in a park full of laughter. "Answer me when I speak to you, boy!" Matthews snapped. That's when James moved. His hand came up, not fast, not aggressive, just precise. He wrapped his fingers around the officer's wrist. A grip trained by years in federal combat scenarios. "Let go of my son," James said, voice so quiet it made the bird stop singing. Matthews yanked his arm back like he'd touched fire. He looked at James now. Really looked. And something in his face changed. Recognition? No, not yet. Not fear either. But the tiniest crack in the certainty. The beginning of a fall. James didn't blink, didn't raise his voice, didn't need to, because Matthews had just made the biggest mistake of his career and had no idea what storm he'd just walked into. What do you do when your child becomes a suspect just for breathing? And what happens when the one man you try to humiliate has the power to take down your entire department? This isn't just about a park, or a cop, or a boy. This is about everything hiding under a badge. James didn't drive home immediately. He didn't speak a word to Ethan in the car. Didn't turn on the radio, didn't explain, didn't soften the silence. Because there are some wounds that don't bleed on the outside. The boy sat in the back seat, head leaning against the window, hands clenched in his lap. His eyes weren't wet, but they were loud. Questions danced in them like ghosts with nowhere to go. James didn't answer those ghosts. Not yet. The world outside passed by in slow motion. Lawns trimmed to perfection, flags on porches, pickup trucks with "Back the Blue" bumper stickers. The America that looks safe from far away. But James had stopped looking from far away a long time ago. He pulled into the driveway, parked the car, turned off the engine. He waited. Ethan didn't move, so James spoke. "You okay?" The boy nodded, too fast. James turned, looked directly at his son. "You don't have to say you're okay just because I asked." This time, Ethan didn't nod. He didn't speak either, and that silence, that pause, told James more than any sentence could. The house was small, clean, quiet. James had lived in worse places. War zones, safe houses, bureau bunkers with no clocks and no windows. But this home? This was the first space he had chosen for peace. And now, it didn't feel like his. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, untouched cereal in front of him. The milk spiraled in lazy circles, like it was looking for a reason to stay. James leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes on his son. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said slowly. Ethan stared at the bowl. "Then why did he look at me like that?" It wasn't an accusation. It was a wound. James stepped forward, sat across from him. "There are people," he said, "who look at skin before they look at behavior, who see fear where there is joy, and threat where there is movement." "But I was just playing," Ethan whispered. James closed his eyes. "I know," he said. That night, when the boy was asleep, curled up like a comma in the sentence of their life, James opened the drawer of his bedroom desk. He didn't pull out a weapon. Not yet. He pulled out a photo, black and white, faded at the corners. A younger James standing in front of a field office, badge clipped to his chest. Pride barely hidden behind the calm. It had been years since he left the FBI. Officially, but the instincts had never left. The training had never left. The clarity had never left. And what happened today? That wasn't just injustice. It was a message. A reminder that even when you choose peace, the world doesn't always let you keep it. The file took 10 seconds to open, and 3 seconds to ruin Matthews. James sat in his home office, lights off, screen glow dancing across his jawline. He typed quietly. No rush. No panic. Just precision. He'd seen the name before. Matthews, Travis R., when he first moved to the area. Local patrol sergeant. No prior IA strikes. No suspensions. But James knew better than to trust what wasn't on paper. So he pulled the raw feed. Internal complaint logs. Unpublished grievances. Body cam incidents marked unsubstantiated. Footnotes that didn't make it into reports. One click at a time, the truth unfolded. Pattern. Complaints from minorities, black teens, Hispanic drivers, Somali store owners. Each dismissed, each ignored, each buried just deep enough. James sat back. The silence in the room had weight. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. Ryan Hayes answered on the third ring. "Please tell me this isn't personal," Ryan said, voice already tight. James didn't respond right away. "I need a public footprint," he said. "Something traceable." Ryan exhaled. "How bad?" James stared at the screen. At the face of a man who thought a badge made him bulletproof. "He laid hands on my son," James said. Silence. Then Ryan said the only thing a real friend would. "Okay, where do we start?" 2 days later, James sat across from the school board chair in a meeting that had nothing to do with Ethan. He smiled politely, wore a suit that said former government consultant instead of federal ghost, spoke calmly, offered insight on safety protocols, local liaison frameworks, what schools should know about community police relations. He never mentioned Matthews. He didn't have to, but he left behind a folder. Unmarked. Inside, 2 edited transcripts from previous Matthews body cam reviews, 3 parent testimonials from traffic stops gone wrong, 1 handwritten note from a student who said, The cop who grabbed me looked scared, but not of me. No threats, no demands, just the truth. And James knew. Sometimes, the truth was enough to start a fire. That night, Matthews called him. Blocked number. James let it ring twice before answering. Miller. The voice on the other end was gravel and gasoline. You think you're smart? James said nothing. You want to play this game? James leaned back in his chair, calm. I'm not playing, he said. There was a pause. Then, cold and steady. You people always think you can scream your way into respect. James didn't blink. You laid hands on my son, he said again, voice low. So now I lay hands on the system that let you. He ended the call. He didn't slam the phone, didn't curse, just sat in the dark and waited. Because men like Matthews always make the next move. And when they do, that's when you strike. Ethan hadn't said a word in 36 hours. Not since the park, not since Matthews. Not even when James made pancakes the next morning, his favorite with too much syrup and not enough shape. The boy sat at the table, fork in hand, eyes on the window. The syrup pooled, untouched. James watched from across the room, pretending to scroll through news that wasn't important, pretending not to count the seconds of silence between each breath. He'd seen trauma before. He knew what it looked like when the soul retreated behind the eyes. But it was different when the eyes belonged to your son. That evening, James stood in the hallway, outside Ethan's door. His hand hovered near the knob, but didn't turn it. Inside, he could hear the soft shuffle of pages. Not cartoons, not games. Just the slow, deliberate sound of a child pretending not to be afraid. He knocked gently. Hey, champ. Silence. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. Still nothing. James leaned his forehead against the door, the cool wood grounding him. You didn't do anything wrong. None of this was your fault. He waited. Then, if I tell you something, will you promise not to hate the world for it? A pause, then the quietest voice. I think I already do. James sat outside that door for an hour, not to fix things, just to let Ethan know someone was still there. He didn't cry, couldn't, because crying felt like surrender. And James wasn't built for surrender, but something inside him cracked. Not broken, not yet, but cracked wide enough for the guilt to seep in. The next morning, James opened a drawer he hadn't touched in years. Inside was a badge, old, scratched, heavy. It used to mean something. Now, it felt like a receipt for all the times he stayed quiet, for every headline he ignored, for every officer he'd given the benefit of the doubt. He placed the badge face down on the table, then picked up his phone. Ryan answered mid-yawn. Yeah? James spoke without pause. Find me everything on Matthews. I want names, friends, disciplinary reports, internal jokes. Who covered for him? Who looked the other way? I want the system. Ryan blinked on the other end of the line. You okay? James stared at the window, at the sun that looked too bright for the kind of day it was. No, he said. I'm angry. And for once, he let himself be. There was another hallway. Longer. Darker. The kind that smelled like burnt coffee, toner ink, and secrets. Washington, D.C., 6 years ago. The bureau's 5th floor. James stood outside a glass conference room, watching 4 men in ties decide the fate of a suspect, without looking at the evidence. He had presented it. Clear. Undeniable. A senior field agent accused of falsifying case reports to boost his clearance metrics. They smiled. They said things like, let's handle this internally. They told James, we can't afford the press right now. He remembered standing there, folder in hand, mouth dry, wondering what the badge meant if it only served itself. He didn't raise his voice that day, didn't file a formal complaint, didn't go to the media. He resigned 2 weeks later. That folder had stayed sealed until now, and now, his son had been grabbed by someone just like the man he once tried to expose. Matthews wasn't new, he was the next iteration. Same entitlement, same impunity, Same silence! James sat at his desk that night, reviewing it all. Not just Matthews. The whole pattern. The whispers in the locker rooms. The jokes that weren't jokes. The code words officers used when they thought no one was listening. And in the middle of it, people like Ethan. Kids. Caught in the crossfire of unchecked power and cowardly silence. There was one complaint James remembered from his days in the bureau. A woman named Melanie Ortiz, widow of a man Matthews arrested and accidentally injured during a DUI stop. No body cam footage, no medical report, just 3 broken ribs and a closed case. She had mailed a handwritten letter to the FBI's community division. It was marked non-actionable. James found it filed under N. He read it again, and this time it wasn't just a letter. It was a matchstick. He picked up the phone. "Ryan, I need to talk to someone who's ready to go on the record." Ryan exhaled. "You sure?" "She deserves a voice," James said. "They all do. Because the world doesn't change just because a boy got grabbed in a park. It changes when we stop letting it happen quietly. It changes when people say, 'Enough.' And maybe you're not a federal agent. Maybe you don't carry a badge or a camera. But if you've ever been silenced, would you stay quiet now? If this story hits you somewhere deep, don't just scroll. Share your voice, comment below, or ask yourself, what would you have done if that boy were your son?" The next morning, James shaved. Not because he needed to, because it helped him think. The blade scraped against his jaw in clean, quiet strokes. The same way he used to prepare before mission briefings, depositions, or facing a hostile Senate committee. Control the small things, so the big things don't control you. He opened a drawer, took out a flash drive he hadn't touched since Quantico. It wasn't full of secrets, just receipts, training footage, field memos, case files he'd written, people he'd helped, names that had thanked him, names that had tried to bury him. He wasn't building a case against Matthews anymore. He was building a case against the ecosystem that created him. At noon, he met Ryan at a corner booth in a diner no one important ever visits, which made it perfect. Ryan looked like he hadn't slept in days. He had a manila envelope and a tablet full of timestamps. 6 confirmed complaints, 3 witnesses willing to talk. 1 public records request we filed this morning just got flagged. James nodded. "Flagged how?" Ryan slid over the tablet. "Internal Affairs called the clerk twice within 2 hours of us requesting it. Someone's nervous." Good. The plan wasn't flashy. It was relentless. They started slow, leaked just enough to get attention, but not enough to trigger suppression. A redacted video. A still image of Matthews smiling next to a restrained teen. A witness quote. He told me, "We get rid of kids like that before they become problems." Each post sharpened the public edge. Each tweet planted seeds. Each headline stretched the rubber band just a little more, until the story wasn't about James anymore. It was about every Ethan, every kid grabbed too hard, every family silenced with paperwork, every officer protected by a system that forgot who it was supposed to serve. That week, 3 more parents came forward. One was a librarian. One was a nurse. One had lost her son 5 years ago. All had stories, all had names, and now they had platforms. Because James didn't want attention. He wanted amplification. Then the calls started. From city council members, from education boards, from Matthew's own precinct, anonymously. The message was clear. Keep going. And maybe for the first time, James allowed himself to think. This wasn't just a fight. It was a reckoning. If you've ever been told to stay quiet, if someone made you feel like the room wasn't meant for you, if you've watched injustice win just because no one had the strength to call it what it was, now is your moment. Leave a comment, share this story, or tell us your own. Because silence doesn't protect the innocent, it only comforts the guilty. It wasn't planned. James hadn't expected to see him there. Not in that place, not in front of that many people, not with a microphone in his hand. But there he was, Officer Travis Matthews, pressed uniform, polished badge, and a face practiced in pretending. It was a community trust forum, hosted by the local precinct and the mayor's office. PR at its finest. Matthews stood behind a podium, flanked by 2 city officials, who looked like they were holding their breath. He cleared his throat. Our department values transparency, and we're always looking to improve relationships with the people we serve. James was at the back of the room. He didn't blink. He didn't shift. He just watched. Matthews scanned the audience, and then he saw him. James. No badge, no title, just a black father in a gray coat, staring straight through the uniform. Matthews hesitated, just half a second. But it was enough. He lost the room, not with a scandal, with a silence. James stepped forward. Not fast, not threatening, just enough to change the temperature. And then he spoke. From the floor, no mic, no lights, just voice. Officer Matthews. All heads turned. Matthews straightened. Sir, if you have a question, please use the... I don't need a mic, James said. The room froze. I just need one answer, he continued, then paused. Let it breathe. What exactly did my son do to deserve being grabbed like a criminal? The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was deafening. Matthews's mouth opened, then closed. The moderator stuttered. We can take questions after... But James wasn't finished. Because if laughter and running and being 10 years old are now threats, then maybe the badge isn't broken. Maybe it's doing exactly what it was designed to do. No one clapped. No one needed to. Because everyone felt it. The curtain had dropped. And what stood behind it wasn't law. It was fear, wrapped in protocol, backed by silence. Matthews left early. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't shake hands. He didn't look back. James stayed until the lights came on, then walked out without a word. But the people who heard him that night, they never forgot. Sometimes the loudest call for justice isn't a scream. It's a single question, asked at the right moment. The footage dropped at 6:42 a.m. Not through a major outlet, not on primetime news. Just a 34-second clip on a small account that had been silent for 6 years. A hand, a uniform, a child's flinch. A voice saying, "Answer me when I talk to you." Then another voice, quiet, steady. Let him go. No narration, no edits, no hashtags. Just truth, and it spread like fire. By noon, it had 2.3 million views. By 3 p.m., 3 local reporters were outside the precinct. By 5 p.m., Officer Travis Matthews was placed on temporary suspension pending investigation. But James knew better than to celebrate a headline. Because power doesn't die when it's embarrassed. It dies when it's cornered. And this wasn't the end. Not yet. 2 days later, a reporter knocked on James's door. He didn't open it. He just slid an envelope through the mail slot. Inside, a timeline of complaints, internal memos, a list of names, not a confession. A map. And every person on that list had looked the other way. Until now. At the next city meeting, they tried to spin it. Policy reform, sensitivity training, rebuilding trust. James didn't attend. He didn't need to. Because this time, they were speaking in his shadow. And Ethan? He started laughing again. Not the kind of laugh that hides pain, the real kind. The kind that fills a room and makes strangers turn and smile. One night while James tucked him in, Ethan asked, "Do people still think I'm a problem?" James looked at him and said what took him years to believe himself. "No, they think you're a reason." The badge James once wore still sits in a drawer, untouched. Not because he's ashamed, but because now he doesn't need it. The world knows his name. And if they forget, he'll remind them, because justice doesn't always knock. Sometimes it waits in the park, in silence, with a father who never raised his voice, only his standards. If you believe truth has power, even without a badge, share this story, because the next Ethan could be someone you love.